Cool. Thanks for coming out today. My name is Kartik. I'm a founding engineer at Say, and today I'm going to be talking about X402, or as I like to call it, the only practical use case in crypto and AI. So, brief background, I used to work at NVIDIA. I was on the self-driving team, was at Carnegie Mellon after that, doing a lot of AI research, and also worked at Google. So I come from a more traditional AI background, and I care a lot about practicality, not just ideology, right? And today, we'll first go over the crypto and AI landscape, then we'll talk about sort of X402 and why it actually brings practical benefits, and then what we're doing here at Say to improve the X402 ecosystem. So I think there's a fundamental disconnect in crypto and AI. Whenever you ask someone in crypto, they always say AI needs crypto. But then when you ask anyone in AI, they say definitely not. Everyone in crypto thinks that you need decentralization, tokenization, on-chain agents, but in reality, you just need the normal centralized APIs, traditional infra, and anything out of the box right now, right? And so the challenge that I'm really interested in is how can we bridge this practicality gap? What actually is a net new use case that crypto provides that normal users can benefit from? And I think that's payments. So I'm going to run through some examples of these crypto and AI projects that I think are, interesting to say the least. There's a new chain called Sentient out there, which is, supposed to help incentivize people, collect data, run emissions. You get a token if you, contribute to the model. None of this is actually useful. And I'm willing to bet that these new models, community owned, don't actually provide a benefit to users. It's just decentralization theater. Story Protocol is another one. They raised so much money to build this like IP layer to collect data. They're clearing the IP that normally you can't access data. Oh. Give it a second. So Story is another one where they raise a lot of money. There's a lot of incentive to say that IP is something that blockchains can enable, but in reality, blockchains are unnecessary here. Data gets collected fine through normal data collection schemes. OpenAI, the big labs, et cetera, are collecting data fine. There's no net new addition that's practical here. And I think the chief problem with the way that we in crypto think about these problems is that we start with this one broad problems. Maybe I don't trust OpenAI, I don't trust these frontier labs. And then they go to an extreme. Oh, I need decentralized private inference that's community owned. In reality, it's more like something in the middle, right? If you don't trust OpenAI, you don't trust the big labs, you might go to something like open source or something like a hosted open source. You don't need the blockchain or decentralization just for the sake of it. And another example is ERC-8004. Again, I personally think that it's interesting, but it's mostly overkill. Reputation and ID does not need to be on chain. You could probably just use DNS and signed headers. So the takeaway for me is, I think, again, blockchains are made for financial transactions, and there's one key thing that causes issue right now for agents, and that's card networks. So let's do a brief refresher of card networks. Right now, they have a minimum fee. So they're 30 cents usually, or even higher on normal card networks, where you cannot do a microtransaction. Settlement is T+1 or T+2, so I don't have instant settlement. I have to wait a day or two. There's always a chargeback risk. So if I buy something, there's a potential that it gets reverted. Right now, there's no global access, right? It's very like country by country and depends on the card network that you use. And another important case is that it's not 24/7. It's only on business hours, and depending on the rail you use, it's not consistent. And so I think stablecoins have 4 clear properties that are practical for normal users. Ignore the decentralization. They're micro. So you can send micro payments which are less than a cent. You can instantly settle them, right? So on normal fast finality chains, like say they settle in like 400 milliseconds as opposed to T+1 or T+2. They're global by default. So anybody who trusts the network by definition has access to these stablecoins, and they're cross-border operating 24/7. And they also have some cool programmable properties, right? Like they have guardrails, spend limits, whatever you need, you can program in. And so I want to walk you guys through this, how you OpenClaw and this whole explosion of AI agents, how you normally connect them to these MCP tools. And this will kind of paint a picture for why I think stablecoins make perfect sense for payments of these agents. Right now, if I have an OpenClaw agent or whatever agent I have right now, it first discovers these tools. Like let's say I want to find the weather in San Francisco, or I want to buy specific data about a specific trade. It has to discover each of these tools separately. It has to manually create an API key for each of these tools. Now again, that's a security risk, right? I have to manage those keys somewhere. I have to store them properly and make sure they don't get leaked. And then I have to pay a subscription in fiat at the end of each month, right? So for every tool, I have to set up an account, I have to pay it monthly, and I cannot get charged per use. It's a system fundamentally designed for humans and not for agents, right? It's very high friction, and when I'm vibe coding or I'm just having my agent do something, I don't want to have to manually come in and set up an account for each of these specific tools. It should be able to discover it on the fly and do what it needs to do. And so the crucial unlock that a lot in the industry are noticing, even outside of crypto, is give it a wallet and give it stablecoins, right? So if my OpenClaw agent has a wallet, it can discover each of these tools, like getting the weather in San Francisco or whatever other instant tool that it needs, and then it can instantly access it by paying in a microtransaction rather than needing to sign up or manage an API key, right? So again, no management of API keys. You only pay for what you use. And because micropayments are allowed, these APIs become allowed to pay on the fly. So again, like if I request the weather in San Francisco, you're talking about like 1/100th of a cent, right? And that's just not possible when card network minimums are 30 cents, right? So this sort of flow makes a lot of sense for normal users. You don't have to care about decentralization. You don't have to care about censorship resistance. You just have to care about what's practical. So I'd say, where are we focused? X402 still is very early, and candidly, there's a lot of missing pieces. But we feel like this protocol has a lot of potential. So let's start with the wedge. I think one huge issue that people notice for agentic commerce is that they jump to the top left quadrant. So, this is the transaction value mapped against the transaction frequency. Stablecoins do not make sense for high frequency, low value transactions, or high value, low frequency transactions, sorry. So for shopping and commerce, where I pay like $10 very infrequently, stablecoins make no sense. Chargeback actually is needed because if I don't receive, let's say, the jacket, I need to claim fraud. I only do it maybe once every week or once every day. It's not very frequent. And card networks sort of fulfill their purpose here, right? It's way above the 30-cent minimum. X402 doesn't matter. So when Stripe talks about, ACP or all these other agentic commerce protocols, shopping is not that interesting to us. I think where stablecoins and X402 actually win, and where the wedge that we are focused is the bottom left, bottom right quadrant. That's very high frequency but low value transactions. So these are APIs in particular, right? So you're talking about, just like the getting the weather from San Francisco, you're talking about 1/1000th of a cent. You're making a lot of these calls. Stablecoins make sense because they're micro and they instantly settle. So I don't have to deal with any chargeback risks, and I can settle each payment independently. That is the wedge, in my opinion. So how can we take this wedge for APIs and actually productionize it? We've been looking a lot into these proxy servers. So there's a really interesting business model that pops up with stablecoins. I can buy APIs in bulk, and I can resell them per call in stablecoins. So think about it like in Costco. I buy a bunch of toilet paper. I can then sell you individual toilet paper rolls at my deli or wherever that is per use. And so that's what's happening right now in the X402 ecosystem as well. There's all these upstream APIs like OpenAI's API, a weather API, that maybe one organization can set up a fiat API account. And then I set up a layer, which is like this proxy server layer. And anybody can pay per use against that API that I'll proxy, to that upstream API. They can pay per use in stablecoins. So any agent can maybe pay me a cent. It will go through to my API to, let's say, OpenAI's LLM, but they don't have to worry about setting an API. They don't have to worry about paying in fiat, just what they use, right? And so you can even charge a margin on top of that, but this sort of buy API in bulk and resell per call is, in my opinion, an important wedge, right? Another huge problem for X402 is that fundamentally stablecoins are not widely adopted, right? Like in crypto and in this conference, people are excited about stablecoins. Normal people, like, throughout like the US, they could care less, right? And what are they used to? They're used to credit cards, right? So if I want something, I get it, I buy it immediately. There's no friction and it works, right? But with stablecoins, I have to deal with this whole on-ramp mess, right? And this has not been solved cleanly. So stablecoins operate like debt fundamentally, right? You have to fund it first. So if I don't have USDC, I have to go through this hurdle of like going through a crypto exchange, doing KYC verification, waiting for the bank transfer. Like, it's just such a high friction that normal users are not going to do this, right? And if I had to do this every single time, like, I just drop off. And so we're thinking a lot about these pre-funding hurdles that we can get over with things like an embedded on-ramp. And this is common in the industry. There's, let's say, Coinbase Pay or Apple Pay. Inside the app, you can sort of do Apple Pay and maybe get $20 in USDC. But the problem with this is, of course, they hit limits, right? The maximum is usually like $20 or $25. The more interesting case is the credit layer. And so in this case, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail, but you can think about having this basic risk engine that fronts you the stablecoins, and then you pay in fiat maybe later on, at the end of the month, et cetera. And so the risk engine can be based on the agent's on-chain history, your repayment behavior, and your identity. And it can front you the stablecoins so that you don't have to do that on-ramping itself. And there's a bunch of protocols coming out here, but this avoids the UX problem of needing to on-ramp. We've looked a lot into like facilitator fees. And so for those who are familiar with X402, we actually have a proposal out now. Facilitators are the gateway to X402, right? So when I send a transaction, it lands on the blockchain via facilitator. It's almost like an RPC or a paymaster. But the problem right now is that facilitators are charging fees. There's no consistent standard to disclose those fees. So am I charging bips on those transactions, or am I charging a flat fee? You don't know. So we're trying to standardize that and make it really easy to route dependent on which specific fee model you prefer. And then we care a lot about privacy. I won't spend a lot of time here, but the interesting one that even at the L1 layer that we're thinking a lot about is payment lanes. So fundamentally for payments, you care a lot about two things: inclusion and latency, right? Trading is a very different case, right? You care a lot about ordering. But when there's high congestion, I could care less that my transaction sending money to this API or this server comes before someone else's transaction. Like, there's no price difference. But I care that it's included immediately, right? And so you can create this like sort of payment lane that validators can sort of stake to be a part of, and you can guarantee inclusion and maybe take like a BIPS fee on top of it, right? And so this makes payments guaranteed for folks who need like guaranteed access to like these APIs, and congestion that is caused by, let's say, trading or other activity on the chain doesn't influence X402 volumes. Yeah, so that's it for us. Like, again, like, I'd really love for you guys to reach out to me. This is my Twitter. This is my email. We're thinking deeply about, we think deeply about how we can bring X402 to the masses, not just, is this like an interesting nerd snipe? So I'm really interested in the sort of product research that can actually bring this to users outside of crypto, not just people who are at this conference. Appreciate it.